All right. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. Whatever time it is, when you hear this message, I pray that you're poised to receive, to accept, and to respond to words of wisdom. Ashe. I want you to imagine a scenario where you're on a basketball team, and on this basketball team, you only have two players who actually know you're playing basketball. Um, you know, maybe 20% of the team thinks it's a football team, American football. Another 20% of the team thinks it's soccer, international football. Another 20% think you're playing hockey. Another 20% think you're playing baseball. 20% don't even know they're on a team and it's a sport. They just think you're going shopping. And the whole, they think they're models, you know, and you only have two players out there who are actually on the court actively trying to play the game and rally the other players and get them on the same page. And everybody is arguing about who's a good player and arguing about who's got bad character and arguing about should the jersey go inside out or outside in, or you know what I mean? They're arguing about all these details when no one or almost no one actually knows the game that we're playing. In many ways, that is descriptive of our situation as Orisha devotees. We got a lot of people screaming at the top of their lungs, fighting and doing anything that they possibly can to point out the missteps and the flaws and the imperfections of one another when we haven't really come to grips with what we're doing. Okay, and so it's a really difficult situation that we're facing, and it explains the dynamics, right? The profoundly dysfunctional, relationship between members of the greater Orisha family. And so, excuse me, my allergies are you know over the roof these days. But what I the reason why I'm bringing this into the conversation is because I've watched over the years. I watched and I've watched and I've watched and I've listened and I've listened and I've listened, and I have to say that um, after having been around, I've been around almost 30 years. Right, this is the striking realization that I've come to after literally just about 30 years into the tradition, and I haven't seen a cohesive focus on who we are as devotees. There's not enough focus on who we are. What is our collective identity? If you practice Haitian Vodun, if you practice the Afro-Cuban or the Brazilian or the Trinidadian or the Dahomian or the Yoruba variation of our tradition, what is our collective identity? What does Ifa say about who we are? And what does Ifa say that is our mission? See, once we start giving attention to what's really important, who we are, why we're here, then everybody will be able to draw a straight line from wherever they're coming from to where we're going. We don't all have to be coming, we cannot all be coming from the exact same place because we have a vast array of different historical experiences. But we are adhering to a single tradition, right? So it reminds me of an exercise that we used to do back in my day as a diversity trainer. And we had an exercise to exemplify this. In many ways, our problem is a diversity problem. And we would have an exercise where we would give, right, a group of people, maybe you got 4 people, and you put them at a table and you give them a deck of cards. and you tell them you're going to play a game of 21, for example. And each of the four people, though, you give them a different set of rules. And in the rules, for one person, you tell them that the ace is the high card. For another person, you tell them that the king is the high card. For another person, you tell them the joker is the high card. And for another person, you tell them that the queen is the high card. Now they're going to play 21, and they just cannot talk. That's the rule, right? And so they play the game. And what happens as the game is played? It's all good when somebody plays a 10, and then there's a 9 and a 6 and a 2, and the person the 10 takes it, right? There's another hand, and then the 8, and then there's a 4 and a 3 and a 2. Okay, right? The 8 takes the. But what happens? It starts getting tricky when a king and a queen and a jack, a king and a queen, an ace and a joker all come down, and everybody thinks that I should take the pot. And what happens? Well, the person who's the quickest takes the pot once, and everybody who's used to, let's say the guy who's the quickest the first time has the ace. Everyone who's used to the ace being the high card sees no problem with that. But for the person who was told that the joker was the high card, he's not happy. But the game keeps going because they can't talk. They keep playing, and then eventually what happens? Well, the person who believes that the joker is the high card, the first time he let it ride, but the second time he's reaching out there and he's taking his cards. And then the queen does the same thing, and then the person takes the queen, and then they take their cards. And so in the confusion, what you get is, and this is the way to exercise. This is a real exercise I've done a number of times with a variety of different groups. It always pans out this way. Eventually, what happens? People start taking cards. Then you get another group of people who observe that there's confusion and the rules are unclear. They don't have any high cards. They have all number cards. They don't have any face cards. They don't have any. But what happens is eventually they realize that it's an uncertain environment. So they just start taking cards. They just start bogarting, as we would say. Just start taking cards because they know that people don't know the rules. Another group of people just pushes away from the table. They don't even care. They're like, this is chaos. I don't know. I'm just going to put cards out here and whatever, right? And they don't care who takes them. They just want to get out of the game without any conflict. Or they just going to keep playing to go along with the motions. They don't really want to take cards. They don't care if they want to lose. They just don't want to be a part of the confusion, right? These are the kinds of things that, if you think about it, you start to see. You can see that playing out in the Odisha community. You got a lot of people out there who they don't have anything. They just know that there aren't really clearly defined rules, and the environment is set for them to start just taking things. And so they do. And then you have people who know better, who can observe even what's going on, but because they don't want to get their hands dirty or they don't want to get their clothes torn, they just go through the motions and they don't really say much. They just let the game ride, right? And then you got some people who are in there and they're desperately trying to make sense of it all. But the key of it is the difference between that exercise and reality is that in the exercise, you can't talk. And we do that so that you can see human nature unfold, right? In this environment, you can talk. You can talk. You can say, this is the game that I'm playing. These are the rules that I was taught. This is how I was brought into the game. This is my understanding of the game. What's your idea? Right? So we have that liberty, but the problem that we face is that we are part of a bigger global economy, and life isn't slowing down for us to have these long, drawn-out conversations. So it seems. And so people, get caught up in a variety of different ways. But because we do have the liberty to talk to one another, and because we have more and more channels, in theory, for us to share, social media has created so many channels for us to communicate on Instagram, on Facebook, here on YouTube, etc. There's so many ways for us to communicate with one another. So I want to do everything that I possibly can to communicate with the people who are listening and the people who are observing the dynamic and know within your hearts and in your minds that there's a better way to do what we're doing. Number one, you got to understand that there's a problem and then there are symptoms. And what I have just described are the symptoms. All those dynamics are the symptoms of a bigger problem. The real problem that we have is that we are suffering from a deep and prolonged identity crisis. We don't know who we are. We've lost sight of who we are. Because once you know who you are, then you know where you're going. Identity is destiny. Beads are not destiny. Pots are not destiny. Initiations are not destiny. Ladies and gentlemen, I have to emphasize this in the strongest way possible. Your destiny is not a ceremony. A ceremony will not reveal to you your destiny. You have to discover and claim and accept your destiny. It's your identity. It's inescapable. There's nothing you can do that's going to allow you to escape from who you are. It isn't going to happen. You are who you are. You are who you chose to be in the prenatal state. It's set in stone. It isn't going to change. No matter how long a log rests in the water, it will not become a crocodile. No matter how long a river flows, it will never forget its source. These are proverbs that reinforce the indelible reality of your identity. Once you get clear about who you are, then it's going to be so much more easy for you to be clear about where you're going, what you should do, and what you should not do, why you should do certain things, and why you should not do certain things. So the real problem that we're suffering from is that not only individually do we not know who we are, but collectively we don't know who we are. And so we settle for being able to stake our claim on these little tiny pots. And I mean that in both sense of the words. Both, if I go to the analogy of the card game, you win the pot and you just take the pot and you take the pot. We're content with being able to just reach out and take the pot and stuff our pockets with a little bit and say we got it, right? Get in the bag, as we would say here in the United States. Likewise, people will content themselves with just getting the pot. I got the Oshun pot. I got the Ifa pot. I got the Shango pot. I got the Oya pot. I got all the pots. We're satisfied with just getting the pots, even though those things are not revealing the reality of our identity. Okay? And so, historically speaking, I can remember a time when Isese, the promoters of Isese, were more true to the reality. Where once upon a time you would run into a babalawo from Nigeria, for example, and he would tell you the reality of how the tradition is practiced and where you get in and why you're doing it. Once upon a time, that was the case. And I can remember sitting in lectures or workshops or being on conference calls and stuff like this, and people who have been exposed to not even the Afro-Cuban tradition. People got exposed to the Miami, New York version of the Afro-Cuban tradition. Not to diss those traditions. I genuinely do not have any bias against one or the other. I practice Isese, and I think everybody else is valid on their own right. But we got to call it like it is. What they promote from Miami and what they promote from New York and project out onto the country and the world at large isn't necessarily consistent with what they do in Cuba. And I just know that based on my limited exposure to Cuba. I went from La Habana to Santiago and did plenty of work from one side to the other. And what I saw in Cuba is very different from what I experienced in the United States from the Afro-Cuban community. Based on what? By the By the mid 90s, the Afro-Cuban tradition here in the United States had become so commercialized and so monetized and so far, divorced from the blood and the ancestral and the community nature of the tradition that people were, you know, they were already orientated towards by the 90s, by the mid 90s, they were already orientated towards selling you things for profit. The Isese devotees came in on the tail end of that, right? And so they adopted the things, the practices as they found them here in the United States. And so, like I said, I could be in the middle of a workshop and a person will raise their hand and ask about getting initiated to this and getting a pot for that and getting elected for the other. And the Nigerian is listening to them and say, no, that's not how our tradition works. We don't have that concept. You keep asking me about who owns your head, and we don't do it like that. You're born into this. And they will tell the story. My mother, blah, blah, blah. My father, blah, blah, blah. This is what I inherited. This is what happened at my birth, only to have the person who has been exposed to the commercialized version of the tradition come back again and say, yeah, but what about this? And yeah, but what about that? And then after like 10, 15 minutes of trying to convince this person that they don't need to do what they think they do, the Nigerian will say, well, yeah, sure, I could initiate you. Come to my compound, bring, X number of dollars, and I'll do it for you. That's what you want. But in their mind, you can see, I tried to tell you, but you seem determined to give me some large amounts of money. So, okay. And then little by little, that became normalized. So now you can find, whereas once upon a time, people would tell you about your family, they would ask you about your bloodline, they would ask you about who your parents were and what they did. Or if you could tell them who you were, you could tell them what your parents did, you could tell them what kind of work your grandparents did, they could tell you and affirm for you, yep, sounds like you come from this kind of a lineage. These are the things that you should do. To now, it's just a foregone conclusion. Hey, folks in America got money to burn. Let's give them what they want. Clients always right. We know that there's a different way to go about this, but hey, this is what they want, and this is what they're willing to pay for. And quite honestly, I have a real economic need. I'm going to satisfy what you want. You get what you want. I get what I want. Everybody keeps it moving, right? And that's a oversimplification of the dynamics, but that is kind of how we have progressed into the point where we are today, wherein we have people today who are giving out and selling all these different experiences, but for no apparent reason, except for it satisfies my immediate need and your immediate need. But how does it contribute to our collective need? How does what the ceremony that we're about to do, the ritual that we're about to perform, how does this help empower you to go out and do what we as a collective are charged to do? Nobody can answer that question. No one's even thinking along those lines. And that is the situation that we find ourselves in today. And you can test this out by probing. Go out there and just scan all of the thousands and thousands of posts that you see online. And I want you to see if you can find even 5% of those posts that are talking about our collective identity. If you can find out of 100 posts, if you can find 5 posts that talk about who we are as an ethnicity, as a nation, as a group, as a collective of devotees, as a community of interest, as a community of practice, if you can find 5 posts out of 100 that talk about who we are, I want you to pull those out and I want you to send them to me. I want to see. If you can find out of 100 posts, if you can find 5 that talk about the meaning of life, why we exist on this planet, what Olodumare created us to do. If you can find 5 posts out of 100 that emphasize and drive home the point in irrefutable terms, that this is who you are, and this is why you're here. This is why Olodumare created you. This is why you have certain talents. This is why Orisha matter to you. If you can find 5 posts out of 100 that drive that home and won't deviate from that, I want to see that message. I want to see that communication. Send it to me. I want to see it. I want to see it. But I'm going to tell you, unless something has happened in the universe and I am just being totally blinded and I don't see, those communications are not happening. We're arguing over trifles and petty concerns that have been characterizing all communications between the members of this Orisha community for 30 years. For 30 years. If I go back into my archives and I pull out messages from 1999, 1995, 2002, 2010, argument, disqualifying this and disqualifying that, and disputing this one and disputing the other one, and they do this wrong and they do that wrong and they don't know any about this. I had a guy just the other day going on and on about who knows what, with zero concept of what we're doing. It goes back to the initial analogy that I gave to you. We are a basketball team that has 10 players. Only 2 of the 10 players knows that we are even playing basketball. But everybody's got mouth to talk about how the other ones can't play the game. But you're all playing 5, 6 different games, none of which are the game we're actually playing. Therefore, when Ifa starts talking to you about victory over enemies, you don't know who your enemies are. Because you can't identify who you are, you can't verify who your opponent is. You can't tell the difference between someone who is giving you constructive criticism and giving you correction and someone who's your sworn enemy. The people who are supposed to be teaching you and guiding you, you're taking them as your sworn nemesis. You're fighting them tooth and nail because you don't know who you are. You don't know who we are. Therefore, it's impossible for you to determine what is proper and what is not, what is good and what is bad, what is constructive and what is not, what is destructive. There's a Greek philosopher who said, for the sailor without direction, all winds seem favorable. For the sailor without a destination, all winds seem favorable. So you're on a sailboat and you got to follow the wind. You don't know where you're going. Hey, if the wind blows you this way, great. If the wind blows you that way, great. Because you don't know where you're going. But land is 5 miles that way. Let the wind take you this way, you're going to die. You let the wind take you that way, there's a 98% chance you're going to die. There is a way forward for us collectively. There is a way forward for us collectively. And the ancestors are blowing those winds of change and transformation and progress all upon us, but we are determined to ignore the way forward. We are more satisfied with fulfilling our own vanity than we are with understanding how we need to be ready, willing, and able to make personal sacrifice in favor of our collective well-being. No one is asking, what is it that I can do for the tradition? How can I devote my natural gifts and talents to the collective well-being? How is the fulfillment of my destiny somehow going to contribute to the well-being of this tradition? Not only today, but in future generations. These are not the conversations that we're having because we have completely turned our back on the idea and the reality that we do have a shared identity. We have a common source. We come from a common source. We are a river that's flowing from a particular place. And we have a particular purpose and we have a particular role on the planet. But we're not talking about it because we want to obsess over trinkets, doodads, and gadgets. And so I'm urging the leaders, I'm calling out to the leaders. I'm ringing the alarm for the leaders that it's a new day in our tradition. A spiritual awakening is taking place, and a different category of leader is emerging and arising. People who are determined to improve the world, to save the world through positive influence. If you're one of those people, then I want you to find out how Obafemi Orikunwa and the Orisha Lifestyle Academy can help you take your practice, not your trinkets, not your stuff, how to take your practice and your life to the next level. If you're one of those people, visit me at obafemio.com or orishalifestyle.com, and let's start getting busy to help you live the medicine that will heal your life and heal the lives of those who you are destined to serve. I look forward to working with you. Bye for now. Odabo.